The scream tore through the castle before the sun even touched the highest tower. Guards dropped their spears and ran toward the sound, their boots echoing against cold stone floors. Servants pressed themselves against the walls, too afraid to move, too afraid to breathe. Somewhere deep below the throne room, behind a door sealed with iron and old magic, someone had done the one thing forbidden above all others. Someone had gone near the sleeping maid. King Cale Ashgrave stood at the top of the staircase, his eyes glowing gold in the dim torchlight, his jaw locked so tight the muscles along his neck stood out like cords of rope. He did not shout. He did not need to. His silence was worse than any roar, and every soul in that hallway understood it. "Who," he said, each word slow and deliberate, "opened that door?" No one answered. No one dared. He descended the stairs 2 at a time, his long black coat snapping behind him like a living shadow. The guards parted before him, without needing to be told. They had seen him angry before, but never like this. Never with that particular stillness that came right before something broke. At the bottom of the stairs, a young steward named Edmund stood frozen outside the sealed chamber, his hands trembling, his face the color of old parchment. "My king," Edmund stammered, "I did not touch her. I swear on my life, I did not touch her. It was the healer, the new one. She wandered in before any of us could stop her." Cale's gaze snapped past him to the open door. The iron had been pushed aside. The old runes carved into the frame, humming faintly with protective magic for as long as anyone could remember, had gone dark. Something cold settled in his chest, colder than any winter he had ever survived. He stepped inside. The chamber was small, round, lit by a single shaft of moonlight, falling through a narrow window, carved high in the stone. In the center of the room, upon a bed of white linen that never seemed to gather dust, lay a young woman. Her dark hair spilled across the pillow, like ink poured onto snow. Her chest rose and fell so faintly that most who saw her assumed she was already gone. Standing beside her, frozen in place with one hand still hovering near the woman's wrist, was a stranger, a healer, judging by the satchel of herbs and vials slung across her shoulder. She had olive skin, sharp brown eyes, and the kind of stubborn set to her mouth that told Cale she was not going to apologize, no matter how frightening he looked. "You," Cale said, and his voice dropped into something low and dangerous, something that made the torches along the wall flicker, as if they too were afraid. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" The healer, whose name was Wren, did not step back. She lifted her chin, instead. "I was checking her pulse," she said. "That's all. I did not wake her. I did not touch anything I shouldn't have." "You entered a chamber that has been sealed for years," Cale snapped, his fangs catching the moonlight as his anger sharpened his features, pulling something wild and inhuman closer to the surface. "A chamber guarded day and night. A chamber every soul in this kingdom has been warned, over and over, never to approach." "I didn't know," Wren said. "No one told me there was a maid sleeping down here. I was following the sound of her breathing. It was too shallow, too weak. I thought someone was dying, and no one was helping her." Cale's jaw tightened. For a moment, the anger in his eyes flickered, replaced by something far more complicated. Fear, perhaps, or grief, worn so long it had become a kind of armor. "She is not your concern," he said finally, though his voice had lost some of its edge. "She should be someone's concern," Wren shot back, refusing to be cowed. "Do you know her skin is cold? Colder than it should be, even for someone sleeping. Her pulse is barely there. Whatever magic is keeping her like this, it is failing. Slowly, but it is failing." The words landed like a blow. Cale's shoulders stiffened. For the first time since Wren had laid eyes on him, the terrifying king looked almost human, almost afraid. "You know nothing of what you speak," he said, but the conviction had drained from his voice. "Then explain it to me," Wren said, "because I have tended to the dying more times than I can count, and I know what fading looks like. And this woman, whoever she is to you, is fading." Cale turned away from her, his hands curling into fists at his sides. Outside the chamber, Edmund and the guards waited in tense silence, none of them brave enough to step inside and interrupt whatever was happening between their king and the stranger who had broken the oldest rule in the castle. "Leave," Cale said quietly. "Now, before I decide that mercy is not something you deserve." Ren hesitated only a moment before gathering her satchel and stepping past him toward the door. She paused at the threshold, glancing back at the sleeping woman one final time. "You can threaten me all you like," she said, "but threats will not stop her from dying. Only the truth will." She walked out without waiting for a response, leaving Cale alone, with the woman who had haunted every quiet hour of his life, for longer than anyone in the castle could remember. He knelt beside the bed, brushing a strand of dark hair away from her pale forehead, with a gentleness that seemed impossible for someone so feared. His hand lingered there, and for a long moment, the only sound in the chamber was her faint, uneven breathing. "You should not have come here," he murmured, though he was not speaking to Ren anymore. He was speaking to the woman who could not hear him. None of them should know. It was safer this way. Safer for you. He stayed there long after the moon had shifted position in the narrow window, long after the castle above him had gone quiet again, the guards resuming their posts, the servants whispering behind closed doors about the healer who had dared to walk where no one else would. By morning, the entire castle knew three things. The king had a secret buried beneath the throne room. The secret was a woman, and for the first time in years, someone had gotten close enough to see her. Word spread through the kitchens first, as it always did. The cooks murmured to the stable hands, who murmured to the laundry maids, who murmured to anyone willing to listen. No one knew who the woman was. No one knew why she slept while the rest of the world moved on without her. All anyone knew was the warning that had echoed through those halls for years, repeated by every steward, every guard captain, every noble who had ever set foot inside Blackthorn Ridge. Never wake the maid. Never enter her chamber. Never test the king's patience where she was concerned. Ren heard the whispers as she made her way back to the small chamber she had been given near the healer's quarters. She ignored most of them, focusing instead on the herbs she needed to prepare for the ailing servant she had originally been summoned to treat. But her mind kept drifting back to the woman in the sealed room, to the shallow breath, to the cold skin that should not have been that cold. She had seen curses before, in villages far from castles like this one. She had seen what happened when magic bound to a person began to unravel. It never ended well. It never ended slowly enough for anyone to prepare. That evening, as she ground herbs into paste for the servant's fever, a knock came at her door. She expected Edmund, perhaps sent to scold her again on the king's behalf. Instead, she found a guard captain named Henry, a broad man with kind eyes and a nervous manner that seemed out of place on someone his size. "The king wishes to speak with you," Henry said. "Alone. In the West Tower." Ren's stomach tightened, though she refused to let it show. "Now?" "Now," Henry confirmed. "And healer, if I may offer some advice, choose your words carefully tonight. I have never seen him like this before, not in all my years serving him." She followed Henry through winding corridors lit by flickering torchlight, past tapestries depicting battles long since forgotten, past portraits of kings whose names history had already begun to erase. The West Tower stood at the farthest edge of the castle, isolated from the rest, its windows facing a wild forest that stretched all the way to the horizon. Cale was waiting for her when she arrived, standing at the window with his back to the door, his silhouette carved from moonlight and shadow. "You said her magic is failing," he said without turning around. "Explain what you meant." Ren stepped further into the room, choosing her words with the same care Henry had suggested. "Curses like this, the kind that keep someone suspended between life and death, they require balance. Something feeding it, something maintaining it. When that balance shifts, even slightly, the person trapped inside begins to weaken. Their body starts trying to wake, even if the magic refuses to let them." "And if the balance continues to shift?" Cale asked. "Then eventually, the curse will break on its own," Ren said, "but not gently, not safely. Whatever is holding her in that sleep, if it fails completely, without the right conditions in place, it could kill her, rather than free her." Cale was silent for a long moment. When he finally turned to face her, the anger from earlier had been replaced entirely by something heavier, something that looked dangerously close to grief. "Her name is Elira," he said quietly. "And she is the reason I have ruled this kingdom alone, for longer than anyone should have to." Ren said nothing, sensing that the king needed silence more than questions in that moment. Outside the tower window, wind moved through the distant trees, carrying with it the scent of rain that had not yet arrived. "I need your help," Cale said finally. the words clearly costing him something to admit. Not as my subject. As a healer, who understands what dying by inches looks like. Why me? Ren asked. You have physicians, advisors, people who have served you for years. Because none of them were brave enough, or foolish enough, to walk into that chamber, Kale said, the faintest trace of dark humor touching his voice. And because you saw something in the first few minutes that my own healers missed for years. I would rather trust someone honest than someone comfortable. Ren considered his words carefully. She thought of the shallow breathing, the failing pulse, the fading warmth beneath skin that should have carried none of the cold it did. She thought of every warning whispered through the castle, every guard who flinched at the mere mention of that sealed door. If I help you, she said slowly, I need to know everything. The curse, the reason for it, why you have kept her hidden, instead of seeking help sooner. All of it. Kale's gaze held hers, gold eyes reflecting the moonlight streaming through the window behind him. Then sit, he said, because once I begin, there will be no turning back from what you learned tonight. Ren lowered herself into the chair across from him, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. Whatever waited on the other side of his story, she suspected it would change everything she thought she understood about the Lycan king and the woman he had sworn to protect above his own crown, his own kingdom, and perhaps even his own life. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the tower windows, carrying with it the first distant rumble of a storm that seemed to match the tension building inside the room. Neither of them noticed. Both were too focused on the story about to unfold, a story that had remained buried far longer than the woman sleeping 3 floors below them. And somewhere in that sealed chamber, Elira's breathing grew fainter still, as if her body already sensed that the truth, long hidden, was finally about to surface. Kale did not sit. He remained standing near the window, arms crossed, as though the story itself required distance to be told at all. 10 years ago, he began, this kingdom was different. My father ruled then, and I was nothing more than a prince expected to inherit a throne I did not yet understand the weight of. Elira was not born into nobility. She was the daughter of a stable master, someone the court barely noticed, someone who spent her days among horses and hay rather than silk and jewels. Ren listened without interrupting, sensing that the king needed to tell this story at his own pace, in his own way. I met her by accident, Kale continued. My horse had thrown a shoe during a hunt, and I found myself stranded near the stables, long after the rest of the hunting party had returned to the castle. She was the one who fixed it. Calm hands, quiet confidence. She spoke to me as though I were simply a person, not a prince, and I found that I liked it more than I expected to. A faint, humorless smile crossed his face, gone as quickly as it appeared. We spent the following months finding excuses to see each other. Small moments, nothing anyone would have noticed, or so we believed. But someone did notice, someone who saw an opportunity in what we thought was hidden. Who? Ren asked quietly. A woman named Odette, Kale said, his voice darkening. A witch who had served my father's court for years, offering charms and remedies in exchange for gold and favors. She had ambitions far beyond what her position allowed, and she believed that if she could remove me from the line of succession, or bind me to something she controlled, she could rise far higher than any court witch typically climbed. She targeted Elira, Ren guessed. She targeted us both, Kale said. She discovered our secret and used it as leverage first, demanding my support for her schemes within the court. When I refused, she grew desperate. She placed a curse on Elira, one designed to trap her between life and death, believing I would do anything to save her. She was right about that much. He turned from the window, his gold eyes flickering with old, unresolved anger. I offered Odette everything she asked. Titles, land, influence within the court, but the curse she had cast was not something she could simply undo. It had rooted itself too deeply, feeding on the bond between myself and Elira in ways even she had not fully understood when she cast it. The more we fought to break it, the tighter it seemed to hold. So you sealed her away instead, Ren said. I had no choice, Kale said. Every attempt to break the curse only seemed to weaken her further. The only thing that kept her stable, kept her from fading entirely, was distance, isolation. A controlled environment where the magic could settle without outside interference. I built that chamber myself, with the help of every scholar and healer I could quietly summon, without alerting the court to what had truly happened. And Odette? Ren asked. What became of her? She fled the kingdom the moment she realized the consequences of what she had done, Cale said. I have searched for her ever since, though the trail has grown cold more times than I can count. Every lead brings me closer, only for her to vanish again before I can reach her. Ren absorbed this in silence, her mind already working through the pieces of the story, searching for anything that might explain the failing pulse she had witnessed earlier that day. You said the curse feeds on your bond, she said slowly. What happens to that bond when you are apart for this long? Cale's expression tightened, and for the first time, Ren saw something close to genuine fear cross his features. I do not know, he admitted. No one has ever attempted to study a curse like this one. Odette designed it to be unpredictable, precisely so that no one could easily undo her work. For years, Illyra remained stable. Fragile, but stable. It is only recently that things have begun to change. How recently? Ren asked. A few months, Cale said. Her breathing grew shallower, her skin grew colder. I summoned healer after healer, but none of them understood what they were looking at, and I could not risk revealing the truth to anyone I did not trust completely. Why not? Ren asked. Why keep this secret for so many years, even from those sworn to serve you? Cale's jaw tightened. Because the moment anyone learns a curse, this powerful still exists within these walls, it becomes a weapon. My enemies would use her against me without hesitation. My allies might demand I simply let her fade, rather than risk destabilizing the kingdom over what they would see as a personal matter, rather than a political one. Ren considered this, understanding the impossible position the king had found himself trapped within for a decade. Protecting Illyra meant hiding her. Hiding her meant limiting the very help she desperately needed. I am not asking you to solve this immediately, Cale said, his voice softening slightly. I am asking you to help me understand what is happening to her, so that when the time comes to act, we act with knowledge rather than desperation. And if I discover something you do not want to hear, Ren asked. Then I will hear it regardless, Cale said. I would rather know an unbearable truth than continue living inside a comfortable lie. Ren nodded slowly, feeling the weight of what she had just agreed to settle over her shoulders. She thought of the sleeping woman below them, fading a little more with every passing day, trapped inside a curse designed by someone who had long since disappeared into the shadows of the world. I will need access to her chamber, she said, regularly, not just once. I will need to examine her thoroughly, document any changes, and search for patterns that might explain what is accelerating her decline. You will have whatever access you require, Cale said. But know this. If anyone within this castle learns the full truth before I am ready for them to know it, the consequences will fall upon both of us. I understand, Ren said. Do you? Cale asked, studying her carefully. Because the moment you stepped into that chamber uninvited, you placed yourself inside a story far larger than you likely realized. There is no walking away from this now, healer. Not cleanly. Not without cost. Ren held his gaze, refusing to look away despite the intensity radiating from him. I did not walk away from dying patients in villages that had nothing to offer me in return. I am not going to walk away from this one simply because the stakes have grown larger. Something shifted in Cale's expression, a grudging respect settling behind the exhaustion that had clearly worn at him for years. Then we begin tomorrow, he said. At first light, before the rest of the castle wakes and begins asking questions neither of us are ready to answer. Ren rose from her chair, preparing to return to her own quarters, though her mind remained fixed on everything she had just learned. A curse born from jealousy and ambition. A woman trapped between life and death for a decade. A king who had sacrificed his own peace to protect a secret the entire kingdom now suspected but did not yet understand. As she reached the door, Cale's voice stopped her. Ren, he said, using her name for the first time since they had met. Thank you for not walking away when I gave you every reason to. She turned back to him, offering a small, tired smile. Thank her when she wakes, my king. Not me. I have not done anything yet worth thanking. She left the tower and made her way back through the quiet corridors, the castle settling into an uneasy stillness around her. Somewhere below, in a chamber sealed with fading magic, Illyra remained suspended between two worlds, unaware that the man who loved her enough to build her a hidden sanctuary had just taken the first step toward finally, truly saving her. But secrets, once cracked open even slightly, rarely remained contained. And within the shadows of Blackthorn Ridge, someone had already begun to notice that something long buried was starting to stir. Dawn arrived gray and quiet, the kind of morning that seemed to hold its breath before deciding what kind of day it wanted to become. Wren had barely slept, her mind replaying everything Cale had shared the night before. A curse born of jealousy. A witch who had vanished without a trace. A woman fading a little more with each passing week. She dressed quickly, gathered her satchel of herbs, tools, and the small leather journal she used to document unusual cases, and made her way toward the sealed chamber before the rest of the castle had fully woken. Cale was already there when she arrived, standing beside the door with Edmund hovering nervously a short distance away. "You changed the guard rotation," Wren observed, noting the unfamiliar faces stationed along the corridor. "I trust these men with my life," Cale said. "That does not mean I trust them with this secret. Fewer eyes near this door means fewer questions I must answer." Edmund cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "My king, if I may, the court has already begun asking why the healer was granted access after yesterday's incident. Lady Grace in particular has been quite persistent in her inquiries." Cale's expression darkened slightly. "Lady Grace inquires about everything that might benefit her position at court. Deflect her questions as you have always done." "And if she does not accept deflection this time," Edmund pressed, "then I will deal with her personally," Cale said, his tone leaving no room for further discussion. Edmund bowed and retreated, leaving Cale and Wren alone outside the chamber. Cale pressed his palm against the door, murmuring something low in a language Wren did not recognize, and the faint runes along the frame flickered weakly before the door swung open. Inside, the morning light filtering through the high window cast long shadows across Elira's still form. Wren approached slowly, setting her satchel down beside the bed before beginning her examination. "I need you to understand something before we start," she said, glancing up at Cale. "I am not a miracle worker. I cannot promise I will find an answer, or that any answer I find will be one you want to hear." "I understand," Cale said, standing at a respectful distance as Wren worked. She checked Elira's pulse first, counting carefully, noting the weak but steady rhythm beneath pale skin. She examined her breathing, her color, the faint tremor along her fingers that suggested her body was fighting against something invisible. "How long has she looked this pale?" Wren asked. "A few weeks," Cale said. "Before that, her color remained mostly unchanged, though I suspect I simply did not notice the shift as clearly as I should have." Wren opened her journal, jotting down observations in quick, careful handwriting. "I want to try something. A simple test to measure how her body responds to certain herbs, nothing invasive, nothing that will hurt her." "What kind of test?" Cale asked, immediately alert. "A tincture that encourages circulation," Wren explained. "If her body responds normally, it will tell me the curse is affecting her mind and her magic, but not her physical systems directly. If it does not respond, that tells me something far more concerning." Cale hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Proceed." Wren prepared the tincture carefully, measuring drops onto a small cloth before gently applying it to the inside of Elira's wrist. They waited in tense silence, the only sound in the chamber the faint whisper of wind against the narrow window. Slowly, color began to bloom faintly beneath Elira's skin, spreading outward from where the tincture had been applied. "That is good," Wren said, relief evident in her voice. "Her body is still responding to physical treatment. Whatever is happening to her is not simply killing her from the inside. Something else is interfering." "The curse," Cale said. "Likely," Wren agreed. "Which means if we can understand exactly how the curse is structured, we may be able to slow its progression, even if we cannot immediately break it entirely." Over the following hours, Wren continued her examination, testing different herbs, observing subtle changes, documenting everything with meticulous care. Cale remained close throughout, answering her questions about the curse's origins, the exact wording Odette had used when casting it, anything he could remember that might prove useful. "She said something before she fled," Cale recalled, his brow furrowing as he searched his memory. "Something about balance, about taking as much as she gave. I did not understand it fully at the time. I was too consumed with grief and anger to think clearly." "Balance," Wren repeated, writing the word carefully in her journal. That could mean many things. Perhaps the curse requires an equal exchange to be broken, something given in return for something taken. What would need to be given? Kale asked. I do not know yet, Ren admitted, but it is a place to start. Curses built on principles of balance often require a sacrifice that mirrors whatever was originally taken. If Odette took Alira's ability to wake, perhaps breaking the curse requires giving something equally precious in return. Kale's expression grew troubled, though he said nothing further on the matter. Ren noticed his silence but chose not to press him, sensing that whatever thoughts had begun forming in his mind were not yet ready to be spoken aloud. As the sun climbed higher outside, a soft knock interrupted their work. Henry, the guard captain, appeared at the door, his expression tense. My king, he said quietly. Lady Grace has requested an audience. She claims it is a matter of urgent importance regarding the kingdom's eastern borders. Kale's jaw tightened. Tell her I will attend to it this afternoon. She specifically requested you attend immediately, Henry said, clearly uncomfortable delivering the message. She has already gathered several other nobles who share her concerns. Kale glanced back at Ren, torn between his duties as king and his desire to remain by Alira's side. Go, Ren said gently. I will continue my examination here. If anything changes, I will send word immediately. Kale hesitated a moment longer before nodding, reluctantly following Henry out of the chamber. Ren watched him leave, before turning her attention back to her patient, continuing her careful documentation of every subtle sign the curse had left behind. Meanwhile, in the grand hall above, Kale found Lady Grace waiting, with an expression that suggested her urgent matter had little to do with borders, and everything to do with the rumors now circulating throughout the castle. My king, Grace said, her voice smooth and measured, though her eyes glittered with barely concealed curiosity. Forgive the interruption, but the court grows restless. Whispers of a hidden chamber, a sleeping woman, and a healer granted unusual privileges have spread faster than I can control. I thought it wise to bring this to your attention before the rumors grow beyond anyone's ability to manage. There is nothing to manage, Kale said evenly. The chamber is a private matter, unrelated to the governance of this kingdom. With respect, my king, Grace pressed. When private matters begin affecting the stability of the court, they become matters of governance, whether we wish them to or not. Several nobles have already begun questioning your judgment. If there is a secret significant enough to warrant this level of concealment, perhaps it is time to consider sharing at least a portion of the truth, if only to quiet the more dangerous speculation. Kale studied her carefully, recognizing the calculated concern beneath her carefully chosen words. Grace had never been simply curious. She was ambitious, connected to several noble families who had long resented the isolation Kale maintained around his personal affairs. The rumors will fade once they realize there is nothing scandalous to feed upon, Kale said. I will not be pressured into revealing matters that remain, for now, entirely my own concern. Grace's smile did not waver, though something calculating flickered behind her eyes. As you wish, my king. I only hope, for the sake of the kingdom's stability, that whatever you are protecting proves worth the cost of this silence. She curtsied gracefully and departed, leaving Kale standing alone in the grand hall, the weight of her words settling uncomfortably in his chest. He had spent a decade protecting Alira's secret from exactly this kind of scrutiny. Now, with Ren's involvement drawing new attention to the chamber, he found himself facing the very danger he had worked so hard to avoid. He returned to the sealed chamber later that afternoon, finding Ren exactly where he had left her, her journal now filled with pages of careful notes and observations. I believe I have identified a pattern, Ren said as he entered, her expression a mixture of cautious hope and concern. But I must warn you, what I have found raises more questions than it answers. Tell me, Kale said, bracing himself for whatever truth waited on the other side of her discovery. The curse appears to be tied, not just to your bond with Alira, Ren said slowly, but to something within this castle itself, something that has begun changing recently, weakening whatever balance kept her stable for all these years. Kale's expression darkened with dawning understanding. Odette. Perhaps, Ren said, or something connected to her original casting that we have not yet identified. Either way, my king, I believe the answer to saving Alira does not lie solely within this chamber. It lies somewhere beyond these walls, in whatever truth Odette left buried the day she disappeared. Outside, the wind picked up once more, carrying with it the distant rumble of thunder rolling across a sky that had grown darker throughout the day, as though the kingdom itself sensed that the search for answers was only just beginning. News of Lady Grace's confrontation with the king spread through the castle by nightfall, growing more distorted with every retelling. By the time the story reached the kitchens, servants whispered that the king had threatened an entire noble family. By the time it reached the stables, some claimed Grace had demanded the sleeping woman be removed from the castle entirely. None of it was true, but truth had never been as interesting as rumor, and the castle thrived on both in equal measure. Wren remained largely unaware of the growing gossip, too consumed with her research to notice the sideways glances following her through the corridors. She spent her evenings poring over the journal she had filled with observations, searching for connections between Alira's symptoms and anything Cale could recall about Odette's original curse. It was Clara, a young laundry maid, who had become an unlikely friend during Wren's short time at the castle, who finally brought the rumors directly to her attention. "They are saying you have bewitched the king," Clara said one evening, helping Wren fold freshly laundered cloths in the small healer's quarters. "That you used your herbs to gain access to secrets no one else has ever been permitted to see." Wren nearly laughed at the absurdity of it. "I assure you, there has been no bewitching involved, only work. Difficult, uncertain work." "I believe you," Clara said, "but belief does not stop wagging tongues, especially among the nobility." Lady Grace has been asking questions of everyone she encounters, trying to piece together whatever she can about the chamber and the woman inside it. "Why does she care so deeply?" Wren asked, folding another cloth with more force than necessary. "Ambition," Clara said simply. "Her family has long sought greater influence within the court. A secret this significant, especially one involving the king's personal affairs, would grant her considerable leverage if she could uncover its true nature." Wren considered this, her earlier conversation with Cale settling uneasily in her mind. If Grace continued pressing, if she managed to uncover even a fraction of the truth, the consequences could prove catastrophic, not just for Cale, but for Alira as well. "I need to speak with the king again," Wren said, gathering her satchel. "There are things he needs to know." She found Cale later that evening in the same tower where their first conversation had taken place, staring out at the darkening horizon, with an expression that suggested his own thoughts had been consumed by similar concerns. "Lady Grace grows bolder," Wren said without preamble. "The rumors surrounding the chamber continue spreading, and if she manages to piece together even part of the truth, I fear what she might do with that knowledge." "I am aware," Cale said grimly. "She has always possessed a talent for uncovering secrets others wish to keep buried. It is part of what makes her dangerous." "Then perhaps it is time to consider a different approach," Wren suggested carefully. "Rather than continuing to hide everything, perhaps a partial truth, carefully controlled, would satisfy the court's curiosity, without exposing Alira to unnecessary risk." Cale turned to face her, considering her words with obvious reluctance. "What would you suggest?" "Tell them she is a ward under your protection," Wren said. "Someone injured, recovering from an illness that requires isolation and careful treatment. It explains the secrecy without revealing the true nature of the curse, or the depth of your connection to her." Cale was quiet for a long moment, weighing the risks of both revealing too much and continuing to conceal everything entirely. "It might work," he admitted finally. "Though Grace is not easily satisfied by simple explanations. She will likely continue searching for deeper truths, regardless of what story we present." "Then we give her enough to occupy her attention," Wren said, "while we continue our work in private. It is not a perfect solution, but it may buy us the time we need." Cale nodded slowly, though his expression remained troubled. "There is something else you should know," he said after a moment, his voice carrying a weight Wren had not heard from him before. "Something I have been reluctant to share, even with you." Wren waited, sensing the significance of whatever he was about to reveal. "Odette did not simply vanish after casting the curse," Cale said. "For the first few years, I received messages from her. Cryptic warnings, veiled threats, reminders that the curse remained under her control even from a distance. The messages stopped eventually, but I always suspected she remained somewhere nearby, watching, waiting for something." "Waiting for what?" Wren asked. "I do not know," Cale admitted. "Perhaps for me to grow desperate enough to offer her whatever price she originally demanded. Perhaps simply to enjoy watching me suffer from afar. Either way, If she is still nearby, still watching, then Grace's investigation into the chamber may draw more attention than we can afford. Wren absorbed this new information carefully, her mind already working through the implications. If Odette remained nearby, if she was somehow connected to the recent shift in Alira's condition, then finding her might prove essential not just to satisfying court curiosity, but to actually saving Alira's life. We need to find her, Wren said. If she is truly connected to whatever is causing Alira's decline, then confronting her directly may be the only way to understand how to reverse it. I have searched for a decade, Cale said, frustration evident in his voice. Every lead has proven false. Every trail has gone cold before I could follow it to its conclusion. Then perhaps we need a different kind of search, Wren said. Not one led by soldiers or spies, but one guided by whatever traces her magic might have left behind. I have some knowledge of tracking magical residue, particularly curses of this nature. It is not something I have widely shared, but it may prove useful now. Cale studied her with renewed interest, clearly reassessing whatever assumptions he had originally held about the healer, who had wandered into his most carefully guarded secret only days before. You continue to surprise me, he said. I have spent years treating illnesses no one else wanted to face, Wren said simply. That tends to require learning skills beyond simple herbcraft. Cale nodded, some of the tension easing from his shoulders for the first time since their conversation began. Then tomorrow, we begin searching in earnest. Not just for answers within these walls, but for Odette herself, wherever she may be hiding. As their conversation concluded, neither of them noticed the shadow lingering just beyond the tower door, nor the careful, measured footsteps retreating quietly down the corridor once enough had been overheard. Lady Grace made her way back toward her chambers with a satisfied expression, her mind already working through everything she had just learned. A curse, a missing witch, a secret significant enough that the king himself had kept it hidden for a decade. She smiled to herself in the darkness, recognizing an opportunity when she saw one. Whatever this secret truly involved, it was clearly far more valuable than she had originally suspected, and she intended to make certain she was the one who benefited most from its eventual discovery. Behind her, unseen in the shadows of another corridor, Edmund watched her retreat with a troubled expression, wondering whether he should warn the king immediately, or whether doing so might only draw more attention to secrets that needed, now more than ever, to remain carefully guarded. He chose, in the end, to wait until morning, a decision that would prove far more costly than he could have anticipated. Morning arrived with an unnatural stillness that unsettled Wren the moment she stepped outside her chamber. The servants moved quieter than usual, their eyes darting away whenever she passed. Something had shifted overnight, though she could not immediately identify what. She found Edmund waiting near the healer's quarters, his expression tight with barely concealed anxiety. Lady Grace requested an audience with the full council at dawn, he said without greeting, falling into step beside Wren as she made her way toward the sealed chamber. She claims to have information regarding a threat to the kingdom's stability. Wren's stomach tightened. What kind of threat? She would not say specifically, Edmund said. But given everything I overheard last night, I fear she intends to reveal at least part of what she knows about Alira, and about the curse. Wren's pace quickened. Does the king know? He has been summoned to the council chamber as we speak, Edmund said grimly. I came to find you first, believing you deserved warning before whatever unfolds this morning. Wren thanked him quickly before changing direction, making her way toward the council chamber instead of the sealed room she had originally intended to visit. She arrived just as the heavy doors were being closed, guards stationed on either side with expressions carefully schooled into neutrality. I need to enter, Wren said firmly. The guards exchanged uncertain glances before one of them, recognizing her from recent days spent near the king's private chambers, reluctantly stepped aside. Inside, the council chamber buzzed with tense energy. Nobles from across the kingdom had gathered, their expressions ranging from curious to openly hostile. Cale sat at the head of the long table, his expression carved from stone, betraying nothing of whatever emotions churned beneath the surface. Lady Grace stood near the center of the room, clearly relishing the attention focused entirely upon her. My king, she began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber, I have long respected your right to privacy regarding personal matters. But when those matters involve dangerous magic, capable of threatening this kingdom's stability, Silence becomes a luxury we can no longer afford. Murmurs rippled through the assembled nobles. Kale's expression remained impassive, though Ren, standing near the back of the chamber, noticed the subtle tightening of his hands against the armrests of his chair. "I have learned," Grace continued, "that a curse of considerable power exists within these very walls. A curse cast by a witch who fled this kingdom years ago, yet who may still remain nearby, watching, waiting, perhaps even influencing events from the shadows even now." The murmurs grew louder. Several nobles exchanged alarmed glances, clearly unsettled by the implications of what Grace was suggesting. "I ask you, my king," Grace pressed, "how can this council trust your judgment regarding matters of state when you have concealed a threat of this magnitude for years, choosing instead to protect a personal secret over the safety of your own kingdom?" Kale rose slowly from his seat, his presence immediately commanding the full attention of the room despite his measured, controlled demeanor. "The curse you speak of," he said, his voice carrying quiet authority, "poses no threat to this kingdom. It concerns a private matter, one that has been carefully managed for a decade without incident." "Without incident?" Grace repeated, arching an eyebrow. "Then perhaps you can explain why the healer standing at the back of this chamber has spent the past several days investigating a sudden and unexplained decline in whatever this curse has bound." All eyes turned toward Ren, who forced herself to remain composed despite the weight of the sudden scrutiny. "The details of this matter," Kale said firmly, "remain mine to manage, as they have been since the curse was first cast." "With respect, my king," said an older nobleman seated near the front, his tone cautious but firm, "if this witch remains at large, capable of casting curses powerful enough to require a decade of careful containment, does the council not deserve some assurance regarding the kingdom's continued safety?" Kale's jaw tightened, recognizing the reasonable nature of the question despite his reluctance to reveal further details. "I understand the council's concerns," he said finally, "and I assure you, I am actively working to resolve this matter, alongside the healer, whose expertise has proven invaluable these past few days." "And the witch?" Grace pressed. "What of her? If she remains nearby, does this council not deserve to know the potential danger she poses?" "I am searching for her as well," Kale admitted, the words clearly costing him considerable effort. "Once I locate her, I intend to ensure she poses no further threat to this kingdom, or anyone within it." The chamber fell into uneasy silence, nobles exchanging glances as they weighed the king's words against their own concerns. Grace, sensing that she had pushed as far as she could without overplaying her position, offered a shallow bow. "I trust, my king, that you will keep this council informed of any significant developments," she said, "for the sake of the kingdom's stability, if nothing else." "You will be informed as necessary," Kale said, his tone leaving no room for further debate. The council session concluded shortly after, nobles filing out in small clusters, whispering among themselves about the implications of what they had just learned. Ren waited near the back of the chamber until the room had mostly emptied before approaching Kale, who remained seated, his expression weary in a way she had not seen before. "That could have gone worse," she offered quietly. "It could have gone considerably better," Kale countered, though there was no real anger in his voice, only exhaustion. "Grace has succeeded in exactly what she intended. The council now knows enough to demand answers, without knowing enough to understand the true delicacy of the situation." "What happens now?" Ren asked. "Now," Kale said, rising from his seat, "we accelerate our search for Odette. If the council believes I am actively managing this threat, they will grant me time. If they believe I am simply concealing a personal matter with no resolution in sight, that time will run out considerably faster." Ren nodded, understanding the new urgency that had settled over their efforts. "I have been considering how to track magical residue left behind by a curse this significant. It requires certain herbs, difficult to acquire, along with a location where the original casting occurred. The stables," Kale said immediately. "That is where Odette first cursed Illyra, though the exact location has changed considerably since then." "Then that is where we begin," Ren said. "Today, if possible. The longer we wait, the more difficult tracking any remaining residue will become." Kale nodded, some of the exhaustion in his expression giving way to renewed determination. "Then let us not wait any longer." They made their way toward the stables together, leaving behind a council chamber still buzzing with speculation, and a Lady Grace, who watched their departure with calculating eyes, already planning her next move in whatever game she believed herself to be playing against a king she clearly did not yet fully understand the depths of. Behind them, unnoticed by either Kale or Wren, Edmund lingered near the council chamber doors, his troubled expression deepening as he considered the conversation he had partially overheard the night before, and the role his own hesitation might have played in bringing them to this precarious moment. The stables had changed considerably over the years, expanded and rebuilt, long after the events that had first brought Kale and Alira together within their walls. Wren moved carefully through the space, her senses attuned to whatever traces of old magic might still linger despite the passage of time. "It has been rebuilt twice since then," Kale said, watching as Wren knelt beside one of the wooden support beams, running her fingers along the grain of the aged timber. "I am not certain any trace of the original casting could possibly remain." "Magic leaves marks that ordinary renovation cannot erase," Wren said, closing her eyes as she concentrated. "Especially magic as powerful and deliberate as what Odette cast. If she wanted this curse to last, to remain difficult to break, she would have anchored it to something more permanent than wood and stone." "Such as?" Kale asked. "Blood, perhaps," Wren said, "or something belonging to Alira herself. Something that carried enough personal significance to serve as an anchor point." She paused, her brow furrowing in concentration. Did Alira carry anything with her regularly? Something she treasured, something she rarely set aside? Kale considered this, memory flickering across his features. "A ribbon," he said slowly. "Her mother's. Given to her before she passed. She wore it in her hair every day, without exception." "Do you know what happened to it?" Wren asked, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. "It should still be with her," Kale said. "I never removed anything from the chamber after sealing it." Wren rose quickly, brushing dust from her knees. "Then that is likely where the true anchor of this curse resides. Not here in the stables, but within the chamber itself, tied directly to something Alira carried close to her heart." They returned to the chamber together, Kale pressing his palm against the door to release the wards once more. Inside, Alira remained exactly as she had for the past decade, her dark hair spread across the pillow, the faded ribbon still woven carefully through a few strands near her temple. Wren approached slowly, examining the ribbon without touching it directly. "May I?" she asked, glancing toward Kale for permission. He nodded, though his expression carried visible tension. "Be careful with it. It is one of the few things she has left of her mother." Wren lifted the ribbon gently, feeling a faint pulse of energy the moment her fingers made contact with the fabric. She closed her eyes, focusing on the sensation, allowing her training to guide her through the subtle currents of magic still lingering within the material. "This is it," she said after a long moment. "The curse is anchored here, within this ribbon. Odette must have enchanted it before casting the spell, perhaps without Alira even realizing what had been done." "Can we remove it safely?" Kale asked. "Break the anchor without harming her?" "I do not know yet," Wren admitted. "Removing an anchor incorrectly could destabilize the entire curse, potentially causing far more damage than simply waiting for it to naturally decline. I need time to study this properly before we attempt anything drastic." Kale's shoulders sagged slightly, though he nodded in understanding. "How much time?" "Days at least," Wren said. "Perhaps longer, depending on what I discover. I will need access to texts on curse breaking that likely exist within your castle's library, if such records have been kept." "They have," Kale said. "Though few have needed to consult them in generations, I will have Edmund grant you full access immediately." As if summoned by the mention of his name, Edmund appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. "My king," he said, his voice tight with barely concealed urgency. "Forgive the interruption, but there is something you both need to see immediately." Kale's expression sharpened. "What has happened?" "A message," Edmund said, holding out a folded piece of parchment, sealed with dark wax, "delivered by Raven, only moments ago. It bears no sender's name, but the seal." He hesitated, clearly unsettled. "The seal matches records of Odette's personal mark, kept in the archives since her disappearance." Kale took the parchment with visible tension, breaking the seal carefully before unfolding it. Wren watched his expression shift from confusion to something far darker as he read the contents. "What does it say?" she asked when he remained silent for longer than seemed natural. Kale handed her the parchment without a word. Wren read quickly, her stomach tightening with each line. The message was brief, written in elegant, precise handwriting. I have watched you search for years, my king. I have watched you protect what you believe is love, unaware that love was never truly the point. The curse remains mine to control, regardless of distance, regardless of time. If you wish to understand why your precious Alira now fades faster than before, ask yourself what changed recently within your castle's walls. Ask yourself who might have disturbed a balance carefully maintained for a decade. The answer may surprise you more than you expect. I will be watching to see whether you finally understand the truth, or whether you continue chasing shadows while the one you love slips further away. Ren lowered the parchment slowly, her mind racing through the implications. She is suggesting that something recent triggered the acceleration of Alira's decline, she said. Something specific. Kale's expression darkened further. She is suggesting it is connected to you, he said quietly. Your arrival. Your entry into the chamber. Ren felt a chill settle over her, despite the warmth of the room. That is not possible. I did nothing but observe her when I first entered. Perhaps observation alone was enough, Kale said, though his tone carried more uncertainty than accusation. Perhaps simply disturbing the stillness of that chamber after so many years undisturbed was sufficient to shift whatever fragile balance had been maintained. Or, Ren said carefully, Odette wants you to believe that, specifically to turn your trust away from me, at the exact moment you need my help the most. Kale considered this, recognizing the manipulation possible within Odette's carefully chosen words. You believe this message is meant to divide us. I believe a witch skilled enough to craft a curse, capable of lasting a decade, is more than capable of crafting words, designed to create doubt, exactly when doubt would prove most damaging, Ren said. We cannot allow her to succeed simply by planting suspicion. Kale studied the parchment once more, his expression gradually shifting from suspicion back toward the careful trust that had been building between them over the past several days. You are likely correct, he admitted, though I cannot ignore this message entirely. If Odette remains close enough to send correspondence this quickly, she may be far nearer than we previously believed. Then we use that, Ren said. If she is watching, if she wants us to react, perhaps we can use her own arrogance against her. Continue our research. Continue searching for a way to break the curse safely, and remain alert for any sign of her presence nearby. Kale nodded slowly, folding the parchment carefully before tucking it away. Edmund, he said, turning toward the steward, who had remained quietly near the doorway throughout the exchange. Increase security around the castle grounds immediately, discreetly. I do not want the court aware of this new development. At once, my king, Edmund said, bowing before departing quickly to carry out the order. Once he had gone, Kale turned back toward Ren, his expression settling into something more resolute than the uncertainty that had briefly clouded his features. Whatever Odette intends with these games, he said, we will not allow her to succeed. Not after everything we have already risked to reach this point. Ren nodded in agreement, though privately, she could not shake the unsettling feeling that Odette's message, regardless of its manipulative intent, might have contained at least a kernel of truth worth investigating further. Something had changed recently within the castle's careful balance. Whether it was her own arrival or something else entirely, remained a question that would need answering before they could move forward with any real confidence. Outside the chamber, the wind continued to build, carrying with it the distant scent of a storm that seemed to grow closer with each passing hour, mirroring the tension steadily building within the walls of Blackthorn Ridge. The castle library occupied an entire wing, rarely visited by anyone outside a small circle of scholars maintained quietly by the crown. Ren spent the following days buried among ancient texts, searching for any reference to curses anchored through personal objects, particularly those tied to grief and loss, the way Alira's ribbon had been. Kale visited whenever his duties allowed, though the pressure from the council continued mounting with each passing day. Lady Grace had grown quieter since the council session, though her silence unsettled Ren more than her earlier boldness had. Quiet, in someone as ambitious as Grace, rarely meant surrender. I found something, Ren said one evening, looking up from a heavy leather-bound text as Kale entered the library. A reference to curses that draw strength from grief. The text suggests that anchoring a curse to an object tied to loss creates a particularly stubborn bond, one that resists conventional breaking methods because it feeds on emotion rather than simple magic alone. Meaning what, exactly? Kale asked, settling into the chair across from her. Meaning that removing the ribbon alone will not be enough, Ren said. The curse feeds not just on the object itself, but on the grief associated with it. Alira's grief over her mother. Perhaps even your own grief over losing her the way you did. Kale's expression tightened. Then how do we break something that feeds on emotions we cannot simply erase? The text suggests balance, Ren said, echoing the word Kale had mentioned Odette, using the night she first revealed the curse's origins. Grief given must be matched with something equally significant given in return. Not another loss, but something offered freely, willingly, without expectation of return. Such as? Kale asked. I am not entirely certain yet, Ren admitted. The text is frustratingly vague on specifics, likely intentionally so. Curse-breaking texts rarely offer simple solutions, precisely because curses themselves are rarely built with simple structures. Kale leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair in obvious frustration. We are running out of time, Ren. The council grows more suspicious daily. Odette continues watching from wherever she hides, and Alira continues fading, regardless of how carefully we search for answers. I know, Ren said quietly, but rushing toward an incomplete solution risks making things considerably worse. If we attempt to remove the anchor without fully understanding the balance required to replace it, we could destabilize the curse entirely, potentially causing the very outcome we are trying desperately to prevent. Kale fell silent, clearly wrestling with the impossible weight of patience against urgency. Ren watched him carefully, recognizing the toll the past decade had taken on him, evident in ways she suspected few others within the castle had ever truly witnessed. Can I ask you something? She said after a long moment. Kale glanced up, offering a small, tired nod. Why did you never simply tell the truth from the beginning? Ren sized. Not to the entire court, perhaps, but to those closest to you. Edmund, Henry, people who have clearly proven their loyalty over the years. Kale considered the question carefully before answering. Because the moment I told even one person, I lost control over how far the truth might spread. Secrets, once shared, rarely remain contained the way we hope they will. I convinced myself that carrying this burden alone was safer, both for Alira and for the kingdom. And now? Ren asked. Now I wonder whether that isolation has cost me more than it ever protected, Kale admitted quietly. Perhaps if I had trusted someone sooner, we would have found answers long before her condition grew this severe. Ren reached across the table, resting her hand briefly over his in a gesture of quiet reassurance. You are trusting someone now, she said. That has to count for something. Kale's gaze met hers, something unspoken passing between them in the quiet stillness of the library. He did not pull away from her touch, though neither did he linger on it longer than the moment required. Thank you, he said simply, for staying, for helping, for not treating this as simply another obligation to fulfill. I am not staying out of obligation, Ren said. I am staying because Alira deserves the chance to wake, and because you deserve the chance to stop carrying this weight entirely alone. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps approaching the library. Henry appeared in the doorway moments later, his expression tight with urgency. My king, he said, breathless. Forgive the intrusion, but a stranger has been apprehended near the eastern gate, attempting to enter the castle grounds under false pretenses. She refuses to give her name, but the guards who detained her say she matches descriptions circulated regarding a certain missing witch. Kale rose immediately, his expression sharpening with sudden intensity. Bring her to the interrogation chamber, quietly. I do not want word of this reaching the council before I have had the chance to question her myself. Henry nodded quickly, before departing to carry out the order. Kale turned back toward Ren, his expression a complicated mixture of hope and apprehension. This could be exactly what we need, he said. Or it could be another trap entirely. There is only one way to find out, Ren said, closing her book and rising to join him. They made their way toward the interrogation chamber together, neither speaking as tension built with each step. If the woman detained at the gate truly was Odette, then everything might finally begin moving toward resolution. But if it was another manipulation, another carefully orchestrated distraction, then they would have lost precious time chasing yet another false lead, while Alira continued fading within her sealed chamber. The interrogation chamber sat in the lowest levels of the castle, cold and sparsely furnished, designed specifically for situations requiring privacy and control. Guards flanked the single door, standing aside as Kale and Ren approached. Inside, seated at a simple wooden table, was a woman Ren did not recognize. Older than she expected, with silver-streaked hair pulled back severely from a weathered face. Her eyes carried a sharpness that suggested considerable intelligence hidden beneath an otherwise unremarkable appearance. "Odette," Kale said, his voice carefully controlled despite the obvious tension radiating from him. The woman's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "It has been a long time, my king. I must say, I did not expect our reunion to happen quite this way." Ren studied the witch carefully, searching for any sign of the deception she suspected lay beneath this sudden, seemingly convenient capture. Something about the ease with which Odette had allowed herself to be caught unsettled her deeply, suggesting that whatever game the witch was playing had only just begun to reveal itself. "You allowed yourself to be caught," Ren said, breaking the tense silence that had settled over the chamber. "A witch skilled enough to craft a curse, this powerful, does not simply wander into a heavily guarded gate without reason." Odette's smile widened slightly, clearly pleased by the observation. "Clever girl. You are correct, of course. I grew tired of waiting for events to unfold at their own pace. I decided it was time to accelerate things myself." "Why?" Kale demanded, stepping closer to the table. "After all these years, why reveal yourself now?" "Because the balance I created has begun shifting," Odette said, her tone almost conversational despite the gravity of her words. "And I find myself curious to see whether you will finally understand what must be done to restore it, or whether you will continue stumbling blindly toward a solution that will only make things worse." "Tell us how to break the curse," Kale said, his patience clearly fraying. "Without riddles, without games." Odette studied him for a long moment before glancing toward Ren. "Your healer has already discovered part of the answer, I suspect. Grief anchors the curse. Balance breaks it. But balance requires understanding what was truly taken in the first place, and I suspect you still do not fully grasp that, even after all these years." "Then explain it," Ren said firmly. "If you truly wish for this to end, stop speaking in riddles, and simply tell us what we need to know." Odette's expression shifted, something almost regretful passing behind her sharp eyes. "The curse was never meant to punish Alira," she said quietly. "It was meant to punish him," she nodded toward Kale. "I wanted him to understand loss, the way I once understood it, watching someone I loved, chosen over duty, discarded the moment inconvenience arose." Kale's expression tightened with dawning understanding. "This was never about ambition at all," he said slowly. "This was revenge. Ambition was simply the excuse I gave myself," Odette admitted. "The truth is considerably less flattering. I loved someone within this court once, someone who chose duty and status over what we shared together. When I saw you choosing Alira, despite the risks to your position, despite everything duty demanded of you, something inside me could not bear to watch you succeed where I had failed. So you cursed her to suffer for your own pain," Ren said, disgust evident in her voice. "I cursed her to ensure he would understand exactly what helplessness felt like," Odette corrected. "Watching someone you love slip away, unable to do anything to stop it. I wanted him to carry that weight, the way I had carried mine." Kale's hands curled into fists at his sides, restrained fury radiating from him despite his obvious effort to maintain composure. "And now? After a decade of watching me suffer exactly as you intended, what do you want now?" Odette's expression softened slightly, years of carried anger seeming to weigh heavily upon her in that moment. "I want it to end," she said quietly. "I did not anticipate how long this would stretch, nor how much watching your suffering would eventually begin to feel less like justice and more like cruelty I no longer wish to carry." "Then tell us how to break it," Ren pressed. "If you truly regret what you have done, prove it." Odette was quiet for a long moment before finally speaking. "The curse requires an exchange of equal grief," she said. "Kale must offer something as precious to him as Alira's ribbon was to her, something tied to genuine loss, freely given, without expectation of return. Only then will the balance shift enough to release her safely." "What kind of loss?" Kale asked. "Something personal," Odette said. "Something connected to your own grief, your own vulnerability. The curse feeds on emotional weight. It requires weight in return to release its hold." Kale's mind raced through the possibilities, searching through years of loss and grief he had carried since taking the throne. His father's death, The isolation of ruling alone, the weight of protecting Alira in silence for a decade. My crown, he said slowly, realization dawning. Not literally, but everything it represents, the isolation, the distance I have maintained from everyone around me in the name of duty. If I offer to release that isolation, to finally live openly, rather than hiding behind secrecy and control, perhaps that constitutes the balance you speak of. Odette studied him carefully, something almost approving flickering behind her calculating gaze. It might, she said. Grief tied to isolation, offered freely, in exchange for grief tied to loss. It is a fitting balance, if you are willing to follow through completely. What does completing it require? Ren asked. A ritual, Odette said, performed within the chamber, where she sleeps, using components I can provide, assuming you are willing to trust me enough to guide you through it. Kale's expression hardened with suspicion. Why should I trust anything you offer, after everything you have already done? You do not have to trust me, Odette said simply. You simply have to trust that ending this benefits both of us, more than continuing it ever could. I am tired, my king. Tired of carrying anger that has long outlived whatever satisfaction it once provided. Whether you believe my regret or not, the ritual I offer remains your best chance of saving her. Ren glanced toward Kale, recognizing the impossible position he now faced. Trusting Odette carried obvious risk, yet refusing her offer meant continuing to search blindly for answers, while Alira's condition continued deteriorating with each passing day. We will need time to consider this, Ren said carefully, and guarantees that whatever ritual you propose will not cause further harm. Time is precisely what you no longer have in abundance, Odette said, her expression growing serious. Alira's condition will not simply pause while you deliberate. If you wish to save her, the ritual must be performed soon, before the curse progresses beyond any point of recovery. Kale studied the witch for a long moment, weighing years of anger and suspicion against the desperate hope that perhaps, finally, an answer had arrived. Show us what the ritual requires, he said finally. But know this, Odette. If this proves to be another manipulation, another cruelty disguised as an offer of help, you will not leave this castle again. Odette's expression remained calm, despite the clear warning in his words. I understand the risk I am taking, she said, but I would rather face your wrath having tried to make amends than continue living with the weight of what I have already done. As the three of them began discussing the specifics of the ritual Odette proposed, none of them noticed Lady Grace, standing just beyond the chamber's narrow window, having followed the guards who escorted Odette earlier, now listening carefully to every word being exchanged within, already calculating how this new information might serve her own ambitions before the night was through. Preparations for the ritual began quietly, conducted under cover of night to avoid drawing attention from the council or the growing number of nobles who had begun openly speculating about the strange developments unfolding within the castle. Odette provided a list of components needed, rare herbs and minerals that Ren recognized from her studies, along with several ingredients she had never encountered before. These will need to be gathered from the forest beyond the castle walls, Odette explained, studying the list carefully in the dim candlelight of the chamber they had claimed for their preparations. Moonflower petals harvested only under a full moon, river stones taken from water that flows directly from mountain snow. Both are essential to the balance the ritual requires. The moon will be full tomorrow night, Kale said, glancing toward the narrow window where a sliver of silver light had already begun creeping across the darkening sky. That gives us little time to gather everything necessary. Then we should begin immediately, Ren said, already moving toward the door. Henry can accompany me into the forest to gather what we need, while you remain here to prepare the chamber according to Odette's instructions. Kale hesitated, clearly reluctant to remain separated from the search, though he recognized the practical necessity of dividing their efforts given the limited time remaining. Be careful, he said. The forest surrounding this castle has never been entirely safe, even during daylight hours. I have survived considerably more dangerous circumstances, Ren said, offering a reassuring smile, despite the tension clearly written across his features. I will return before dawn, with everything we need. She departed with Henry shortly after, the two of them making their way into the dense forest that bordered the castle grounds, guided only by torchlight and Odette's careful instructions regarding where such rare components might be found. Meanwhile, Kale remained behind with Odette, preparing the sealed chamber according to specifications the witch provided. Candles were arranged in a precise circle around Alira's bed, symbols drawn carefully upon the stone floor, using chalk, infused with subtle traces of magic. "You still do not trust me," Odette observed as they worked, noting the careful distance Cale maintained despite their forced cooperation. "Trust is not something easily rebuilt after a decade of suffering," Cale replied evenly, "regardless of whatever regret you claim to feel now." "Fair enough," Odette said, continuing her work without further argument. "I do not expect forgiveness, my king. I expect only the chance to finally undo what I set into motion so long ago." Hours passed as they worked in tense silence, broken only by the occasional instruction from Odette regarding the precise placement of symbols and components. By the time Wren and Henry returned, weary but successful in their search, the chamber had been transformed into something resembling an ancient ritual space, candles flickering gently around Elira's still form. "We have everything," Wren said, presenting the gathered moonflower petals and river stones to Odette for inspection. The witch examined each component carefully before nodding in satisfaction. "Good. Everything is in place. We simply need to wait until the moon reaches its highest point tonight before beginning." As the hours stretched onward, tension built steadily within the chamber. Cale paced restlessly near the window, watching the moon's slow ascent, while Wren reviewed her notes one final time, searching for anything they might have overlooked. "Are you certain about this?" she asked quietly, approaching Cale as the appointed hour drew closer. "No," he admitted honestly, "but I am certain that continuing to wait, continuing to search for alternatives while she fades further each day, is no longer an option I am willing to accept." Wren nodded, understanding the weight of his decision. "Whatever happens tonight, you have not failed her. Regardless of the outcome, you have fought harder for her than most would have, for far longer than most could have endured." Cale turned to look at her, something grateful and complicated passing behind his gold eyes. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything you have risked to bring us to this point." Before Wren could respond, Odette's voice called them both toward the center of the chamber. "It is time," she said, her expression serious, despite the calm authority in her voice. "The moon has reached its peak. We must begin now, or wait another full cycle before attempting this again." Cale took his position at Alira's bedside, exactly where Odette instructed, while Wren stood ready nearby, prepared to assist, should anything unexpected occur during the ritual. Odette began chanting softly, her voice carrying words in a language neither Cale nor Wren fully understood, ancient and resonant, filling the chamber with a subtle, building energy. "Now," Odette said, her voice cutting through the chant, "offer what you intend to give. Speak your sacrifice aloud, and mean every word completely, or the balance will fail." Cale knelt beside Alira, taking her cold hand gently in his own. "I offer my isolation," he said, his voice steady, despite the emotion clearly threatening to overwhelm him. "The walls I have built around myself for a decade, believing silence would protect what I loved most. I offer to live openly from this moment forward, to trust those around me, rather than carrying every burden alone. I offer this freely, expecting nothing in return, only the chance to see her wake." The candles around the chamber flickered violently as his words settled into the air, the ancient symbols drawn upon the floor beginning to glow faintly with pale silver light. Odette's chanting intensified, the energy within the room building toward something powerful and unmistakable. Elira's chest rose suddenly, a sharp, gasping breath breaking the shallow rhythm that had defined her condition for years. Her fingers twitched within Cale's grasp, color slowly returning to skin that had remained pale and cold for far too long. "It is working," Wren breathed, watching in amazement as the transformation continued unfolding before them. But as the light within the chamber reached its peak, the door burst open suddenly, revealing Lady Grace standing in the threshold, flanked by several guards loyal to her family's influence within the court. "I knew it," Grace said, her expression triumphant despite the chaos unfolding around her. "Dark magic, practiced within these very walls, exactly as I suspected all along." "Grace, you do not understand what you are interrupting," Cale said urgently, refusing to release Alira's hand despite the sudden intrusion. "I understand perfectly," Grace said. "A king secretly practicing forbidden magic, hiding a curse from his own council for years. This council will finally learn the truth regarding what you have concealed." The disruption caused the delicate energy within the chamber to falter, the glowing symbols flickering unsteadily, as Odette's chanting stumbled under the sudden interruption. "You need to leave, now," Odette said urgently, her voice tight with warning. "If this ritual is interrupted before completion, the consequences could prove catastrophic." But Grace, either unaware or unconcerned with the danger her presence posed, stepped further into the chamber, her guards following closely behind, weapons drawn as they surveyed the strange scene unfolding before them. "Grace, listen to me," Cale said, his voice carrying an urgency that finally seemed to reach through her triumphant certainty. "Whatever you believe you are witnessing, know that stopping this now will not save this kingdom. It will destroy the one person I have tried for a decade to protect." Grace hesitated, some of her confidence faltering, as she took in the full scene before her, the glowing symbols, the flickering candles, the woman on the bed whose chest now rose and fell with unmistakable, strengthening breath. "She is waking," Grace said slowly, uncertainty creeping into her voice for the first time. "She is," Ren confirmed, stepping forward carefully. "And if this ritual is interrupted before it completes, the magic keeping her stable could collapse entirely, potentially costing her the very life we are trying to save." Odette resumed her chanting urgently, sensing the fragile window of opportunity beginning to close. "The balance is holding, but barely," she warned. "We need silence, immediately, or everything we have worked toward will unravel." Grace looked between Cale's desperate expression and the visible transformation occurring before her, years of political calculation warring against the simple, undeniable humanity of the scene unfolding within the chamber. Finally, she raised a hand, signaling her guards to lower their weapons. "Continue," she said quietly, stepping back from the circle of candlelight. "I will not interfere further, but know this, my king. We will speak of this fully, once she has woken." Cale nodded gratefully, turning his full attention back toward Elira, as Odette's chanting rose once more, the silver light within the chamber steadying and intensifying with renewed strength. The symbols upon the floor pulsed brighter, energy swirling visibly around Elira's still form, as the final moments of the ritual unfolded. "Almost there," Odette murmured, her voice strained with effort. "Cale, speak to her. Call her back. The final piece requires your voice, not just your sacrifice." Cale leaned closer, his hand tightening gently around Elira's fingers. "Elira," he said softly, his voice carrying a decade of grief, hope, and unwavering devotion. "It is time to wake up. I have waited for you every single day, since the moment this curse took you from me. I am ready now, ready to stop hiding, ready to live openly, with whatever comes next, as long as you are there beside me. Please, come back to me." For a long, breathless moment, nothing happened. Then Elira's eyes fluttered open slowly, dark and disoriented, blinking against the candlelight filling the chamber around her. "Cale?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from years of silence. Relief broke across Cale's face, raw and unguarded, in a way none of those present had ever witnessed from the notoriously controlled king. "I am here," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are safe. It is over." The glowing symbols upon the floor faded gradually, the candles burning steadily now rather than flickering with the wild, uncertain energy that had filled the chamber only moments before. Odette stepped back from the circle, her expression carrying a complicated mixture of relief and exhaustion. "It is done," she said quietly. "The curse has broken. She is free." Elira struggled to sit up, weak from years of stillness, though Ren moved quickly to assist her, offering gentle support as the young woman adjusted to sensations she had not experienced in what felt, to her, like the span of a single restless night. "How long?" Elira asked, her voice still rough, confusion evident, as she took in the unfamiliar faces surrounding her. 10 years, Cale said softly, unable to keep the emotion from his voice. "You have been asleep for 10 years. Elira's eyes widened with shock, though the warmth in Cale's gaze seemed to steady her more than any words could have. 10 years, she repeated quietly. "And you waited." "I never stopped," Cale said simply. The chamber fell into a moment of quiet stillness, broken finally by Lady Grace clearing her throat from where she remained standing near the doorway, her expression now carrying something closer to genuine curiosity than the suspicion that had brought her there originally. "I believe, my king," she said carefully, that this council will require a full explanation once matters have settled. But I confess, witnessing what I have just witnessed, I find myself considerably more sympathetic to whatever secrets you felt compelled to protect. You will have your explanation, Cale said, rising from Alira's bedside, though he kept her hand held gently within his own. In full. I no longer intend to carry this burden in silence. Grace nodded, offering a final glance toward Alira, before departing with her guards, leaving the chamber considerably quieter than it had been only moments before. Odette lingered near the doorway, watching the scene with an expression that carried both satisfaction and lingering sorrow. My debt to you is finally paid, she said quietly, addressing Cale directly. Whatever punishment you believe I deserve for the suffering I caused, I will accept without argument. Cale studied her for a long moment, the anger he had carried for a decade warring against the undeniable truth that she had ultimately helped restore what she had once taken. Leave this kingdom, he said finally. Do not return, but I will not pursue punishment beyond that, given what you have done tonight to make amends. Odette bowed her head slightly, gratitude evident, despite her otherwise composed expression. Thank you, my king. I wish you and Alira nothing but peace, for whatever years remain ahead of you both. She departed quietly, leaving Cale, Ren, and Alira alone within the chamber that had held so much pain and hope over the preceding days. In the weeks that followed, the kingdom slowly adjusted to the truth Cale finally shared openly with his council and his people. Alira's recovery progressed steadily under Ren's careful guidance, her strength returning gradually, as she reacquainted herself with a world that had continued moving forward without her for a decade. Cale, true to the promise he had made during the ritual, began ruling differently, trusting his advisors more fully, sharing burdens he had once carried entirely alone. The isolation that had defined his reign gave way slowly to something warmer, something that allowed those around him to finally understand the man beneath the fearsome reputation he had built out of necessity rather than genuine cruelty. Ren remained at the castle long after her original task had been completed, her friendship with both Cale and Alira deepening into something the entire castle came to recognize as an essential part of their small, unconventional family. Clara and Edmund, too, found themselves drawn closer into the king's confidence, rewarded for loyalty that had never wavered, even during the most uncertain days of the search for answers. One evening, months after Alira's waking, Ren found herself standing once more in the same tower, where her conversation with Cale had first begun this entire journey. Alira joined her there, her strength fully restored, her dark eyes carrying a warmth that had been absent from the sleeping face Ren had first encountered. Thank you, Alira said quietly, joining Ren at the window, overlooking the same forest where the moonflowers had once been gathered. For not walking away when you found me. For staying, even when everything about my situation must have seemed impossible. You do not need to thank me, Ren said, echoing words she had once offered Cale in that very same tower. I only helped uncover what was already there, waiting to be found. Alira smiled, glancing toward the door where Cale appeared moments later, his expression softening the instant his gaze found Alira standing beside the window. The council session has concluded, he said, crossing the room to join them. Grace has agreed to support the changes we discussed, provided the kingdom continues seeing the stability she values so highly. And will it? Ren asked. Continue toward stability, I mean. Cale glanced toward Alira, taking her hand gently within his own. As long as I have her beside me, he said, I believe we can face whatever challenges arise, together, rather than hidden behind walls of silence and fear. Outside the tower window, the forest stretched toward the horizon, calm and peaceful beneath a clear evening sky, the storm that had once seemed to threaten Blackthorn Ridge having long since passed, leaving behind only quiet renewal and the promise of a future finally free from the shadows of a curse that had haunted this kingdom for far too long. The Lycan king had once warned that waking the sleeping maid in his arms would bring nothing but wrath upon anyone who dared. In the end, it was not wrath that followed her waking, but the beginning of a peace this kingdom had not known in a decade, built not on fear, but on the courage of those willing to face impossible truths together.